Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Kosis. I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at Niagara University. Tonight, we are going to go over some of the updates that are happening for the financial aid process for the 24-25 year. There are some major changes and some delays due to these changes. So we're going to go over that and then just give you an overview of what to expect for this upcoming year. Okay, moving on. There we go. Here is my contact information. If you do have any questions, it is actually our main number here at Niagara. So if you have any general questions or anything specific to Niagara, please feel free to reach out. Okay, so for the 24-25 year, the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, is going through what is called a simplification process. This was a legislation that was passed a couple years ago to make the FAFSA simpler, to have less questions being asked of parents and students, to kind of streamline everything. Due to this, however, it's a really big undertaking. And so a lot of redesign has to happen. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and they are not ready to have it, the FAFSA be available on its normal October 1st launch. So for the upcoming 24-25 year, the FAFSA will be delayed until sometime in December. Now, just recently, the government has told us that it will be available by December 31st. So to be honest, let's probably expect it either the 30th or the 31st. By law, they do have to have it out by January 1st. That was part of the legislation. So they will be meeting that January 1st deadline, but it won't be until the very end of December because they are still working on it. Now, even though you will be able to complete the FAFSA, starting January 1st, schools themselves will not be able to receive any of those files until the end of January. So unfortunately, things are going to be delayed because schools won't even have the information once students and parents are able to fill out the FAFSA. So unfortunately, things will be delayed, but just keep in mind that, it will open up by January 1st, but schools themselves will not be able to receive any of that information until the end of January. Now, in following years, it will go back to October 1st as the opening. So for your returning years of college, October 1st will be that when it will open, but for this year, for 24-25, it will be delayed. However, what you can do in the meantime is actually create your FSA ID. So this is for really like your electronic signature for all things federal. A student will need their own FSA ID as well as potentially both parents. We'll get to that in a second, but I suggest at this point having both parents create an FSA ID if there are two parents in the household, so that you will have that and are ready to go. It may end up that only one parent has to sign off on the FAFSA, but there might be in some cases that both parents have to. So it's better just to kind of play it safe and have both parents create that FSA ID. I recommend doing this now. Have it ready. It can take up to 3 days to process through to confirm the identity of the person who's creating the FSA ID. So you want to have that done and ready to go when the FAFSA does eventually open up. What you will need to create your FSA ID will be your social security number and then your mobile phone number and email address. Now, there does have to be separate email addresses for each FSA ID. So if two parents share an email, or maybe a student and parent share an email, that can't happen. You're going to have to create a new one for that. For each person, if you don't have separate email addresses, it will not allow you to proceed forward. So that is something you can do right now. You can go to studentaid.gov to complete that. And again, and have it ready to go for when it does open. So the FAFSA, as I said before, it is the free application for federal student aid. It really is the driving factor in determining eligibility for aid other than merit scholarships you might be receiving from the school. So it's really important that you complete this in order to see what type of aid you might be eligible for. Even if you don't think you're going to be eligible for any aid, I always recommend for the first year completing it and seeing what you might be eligible for. Depending upon what schools you're applying to, you might have a larger financial need at one over the other, and you just never know. So again, I always recommend for the first year to complete it. If you're only offered like a federal loan and you don't want to take that, then in following years you wouldn't have to file the FAFSA, but I always recommend completing that for the first year at least. As I said earlier, the 24-25 application will open sometime in December. It has now been confirmed by the 31st, so probably the very end of the month it will be open. And it is based upon 2022 taxes. We do recommend you complete it as soon as possible once it opens. I will say, though, that I fully expect the system to be, I'm not going to say broken, but that there will be some bugs or issues since it's just a complete overhaul. They're still trying to figure things out, as well as everyone kind of going and trying to complete it at the same exact time. So I recommend giving it a couple of days after it opens to maybe flush out some of the bugs, and then after that, go ahead and submit it as soon as possible. Studentaid.gov is where you would go to complete the FAFSA. And really all things federal, studentaid.gov is your main website for that. So some of the changes to the FAFSA. Now, if you've never completed a FAFSA before, then, you won't really know the difference. But, if you have previous students or family members who have completed the FAFSA in prior years, there are big changes. So one of the largest ones is that anyone who needs to put the information on the FAFSA is now called a contributor, and all contributors must give consent. So a contributor would be the student themselves, and then potentially any parents, either parent or step parent that needs to provide the information. They are considered a contributor, and they need to give consent. Now, the main thing they need to give consent for is to use their income information, their tax information within the FAFSA. But the thing is that even if you didn't file taxes for the 2022 year, you still have to give consent. If consent is not given, the student will not be eligible for any federal aid. So it's really important that all parties involved who need to put their information on the FAFSA provide that consent and sign off. There is a reduction in the number of questions asked. Most of the tax information will be pulled in directly from the IRS, again, based upon contributors giving that consent. So the majority of that will be pulled in. So that will help in the reduction of questions. One of the things to think about is that the number of students in college will no longer be taken into account when calculating the SAI, formerly known as the EFC. The SAI stands for the Student Aid Index, which is what it will be called going forward instead of the EFC. Prior years, if you had more than one student in college at the same time, you kind of got a benefit of having your EFC, divided in half pretty much. That is no longer going to be the case. You will still report it. Schools will still be able to see that and perhaps take it into consideration for their own awarding of aid, but it will no longer be considered or taken into account as part of the federal process for determining what the SAI, formerly the EFC, will be. So it's important to keep that in mind, especially if you have students right now, you have multiples in college right now and getting that benefit. It may change for next year what your SAI is going to be. And then in cases of divorce or separation, the parent of record has changed. We'll get to that in a little bit, but just know determining which parent to report on the FAFSA has now changed. Some other changes to the FAFSA, the contributors will be invited to complete their section via email. So it is a multi-step process now, which you can kind of do in one sitting if everybody's there, parent and student are all there at the same time, and they get the emails and can do it right then. But if you're doing it at separate times, it's going to have to be completed at a later time. But it must be done within 45 days. Or the application expires. So for example, let's say student goes in, they started at school, maybe they complete their section, they send an invitation to their parent to be a contributor, and then it's just kind of hanging out there. If 45 days goes by, that application is considered no longer valid, and the student and parent would have to start all over again. So it's really important that, within a week or so, you have the FAFSA completed of when you started it. Students can now list up to 20 schools on the FAFSA. Before, it only used to be 10. This is whichever schools you want the FAFSA information to go to. So that's nice. It's now increased up to 20. The housing question of whether you want to live on campus or commute or be off campus at each school has been removed. So schools might be creating a separate form or a question on the admissions applications. So just be on the lookout for that. You might need one more question to be asked outside of the FAFSA. And then for the 24-25 year, there will not be an option to transfer the data over to a state application. So New York State aid will, if you're attending a New York State resident and hoping to attend a New York State school, New York State aid will have to be applied for separately. This can be done at hesc.ny.gov. So just it should be back in play for following years, but for this year, because of all the changes, they don't have it up and running. So you will not be able to transfer your data from the FAFSA to your state application. It will have to be done separately. So getting back to which parent to report the parent of record. Now, if their parents are married, then both parents are going to be reported on the FAFSA. But if, bio parents are divorced or separated, you're going to answer the questions about the parent who provides the greater portion of the student's financial support, even if the student does not live with them. If this parent is remarried as of today, you're going to answer the questions about that parent and the step parent. So to get a little bit more detailed, so the parent of record is the parent who provided the greater portion of the student's financial support during the 12 months immediately prior to the FAFSA. So it kind of depends upon when you file the FAFSA in determining which parent to report. Now, let's say if neither parent supported the student in that 12-month period, in number one, the parent of record is the parent who provided the greater portion of support during the most recent year. So let's say the student maybe kind of went off to live on their own or something, and the parents really didn't provide that much support in that prior 12 months. You would kind of keep going back until, the most recent year that the student was supported to determine which parent to report. Now, in the cases of, where parents claimed an equal amount of support, then the parent of record is the parent with a greater amount of income or assets. Examples of support could include child support paid, federal state benefits received on behalf of that student, health insurance dependent, etc. So this really does come down to you as a family unit determining, where this might fall. If there is an equal amount of financial support, then it has to go to either the parent with the greater income or assets. And again, assets or support could include those things. So it's up to you as a family to determine that. Schools most likely won't be kind of checking out on this unless there's a conflict or discrepancy that comes up down the line or in conversations. So it really is kind of the honor system, but you have to figure out, which parent would be reporting. And again, if, let's say parent one and parent two are divorced, parent and you are financially supported by parent one and parent one is remarried, you have to report both parent one and step parents information on the FAFSA. They both have to be contributors. So just some reminders, all contributors must give consent. This is very important. It is a change for this year of this consent piece. So it's really important that all contributors do give that consent. Otherwise, there is no federal aid. What you can do now is create your FSA ID. Don't wait, get that done and over with and have it all set and ready to go. And it is something you will use all throughout your years of college. It is an annual process to file the FAFSA. So you will have to use the FSA ID every single year to log into your studentaid.gov site to complete the FAFSA, to do loan paperwork, all that stuff. FSA ID is really important. Again, the state applications must be completed separately this year. For New York State, it's going to be hask.ny.gov to complete that. Financial aid offers going out will be delayed this year. In previous years, some schools were even sending us stuff out in November because we were receiving information in October. But now, since we won't be receiving information until end of January, and to be honest, we have to wait for software systems to be updated. So probably early February is when we'll start actually being able to process things to hopefully send out packages or offers, mid to late February. So hopefully by March. So it does give a shortened timeline. The typical decision date is May 1st, although I'm sure, some schools might give some leeway on that this year. But unfortunately, it does kind of crunch down the amount of time you have to review all your financial aid offers to make that decision of where you would like to go. So just kind of keep on top of that. Just know that they will be delayed. So reach out to financial aid offices with any questions you might have throughout the process. Just know, though, this is all new to us as well. It's kind of like relearning the entire process for us. So please be patient with offices as we kind of figure out what is what going forward. We will help out as best as we can. But we will get through it together and figure out the new form and the new processing that will happen. So just be patient with us if you can. But again, if you have any questions as you go throughout, please feel free to reach out to the offices that of the schools you are planning on applying to. And one last thing I wanted to touch on is when you do start getting your financial aid offers, either in the mail or through your portal, whichever case it might be, depending upon the school, start to compare them. You really need to do a breakdown. And this is an example of a sheet you could use. If you feel free to email us at FAO at Niagara.edu if you'd like a copy of this. but it's really just breaking down. Okay, which school is it? What are they charging me for tuition? Do they have special fees perhaps? Does my program have a special fee that's charged? Am I living on campus and will have food and housing charges? Or am I commuting from home and not having those charges at this particular school? Find out what the exact costs are, minus any grants and scholarships you might have received from the federal, the state, institution themselves, so what's that net price? And then, okay, they offered me loans to help out. Did I potentially get a work study job to help out? So take that into consideration and really compare apples to apples at the very end of it, because that's what is, it's a large decision of where you're going to go to school for the next 2 to 4 years, if not longer, depending upon what program you might be going for. So it's a really important thing to review, to take that into consideration to make that decision. All right, that is it. I know it was a quick overview, but I just wanted to give you some of the major changes that are happening. If you do have any questions, as I said, please contact us or any other financial aid office that your student or yourselves are looking into. They'd be more than happy to help. Have a good day.